It's funny because the more that I was thinking about the title for Daredevil Born Again, I was talking about this with my mom when we were watching the episodes like from 1 through 3 before this episode came out. And I was talking to her about how clever the Born Again subtitle is because I know it's a comic book storyline for Daredevil, but it's such a great thing in this aspect of him being brought into the MCU this way. Born again, representing in a spiritual way about being a born again Christian or born again Catholic and giving their life to God, and especially because it's perfect because of how Matt is a Catholic and that he was brought up in that way. So it's easily such a great way for that. It's so great too because born again also represents of him reinventing himself to being Daredevil again after having the whole issue with seeing Foggy die right in front of him, and he heard him die. He heard his heartbeat stop, and also having to go through the motions of deciding it's time to hang it up, but then seeing the injustice coming back and that it's so much worse in not in just in Hell's Kitchen, but in New York. It's such a great way of like reinventing the character, and then born again of having to be part of the main Marvel universe, or in this case the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I also feel like the title now also not just represents just Matt, but I also feel like it's a great way to represent Wilson Fisk being born again into being thrust into being Kingpin again, because at the end of the season, I feel like what's going to happen is that they're both going to become their old selves again, but they're also going to be stronger in a whole bunch of different ideas in their mindsets, and they're going to just come out for each other's throats. They're going to just want to be able to lunge back into where they used to be and feel like they're better. I feel like what's going to happen in this case is that their lives are going to blur. They went and they put themselves on the side for a long time. But now, because all this is happening and they are not used to their situations that they're in, Matt's not used to being on the side, and Fisk is not used to being on the right side of the law. Now they're going to really dive into this whole thing, and they're going to then not only go back to their old lives, but they're going to end up reinventing themselves. And I think that that's such a great way to be able to bring their old versions of their characters from the Netflix series back. And I feel like with that, it's just such a great way to not feel like you're forced to bring the characters directly back or you're trying to mimic it, but you're doing it in a way where it feels like a natural flow where you have a roadblock and you turn that roadblock into like this character progression that it needs to happen before they could be able to go back to their old selves, regardless on if they like that decision or not.
Answer that honestly. It's just the like, especially with the reinventing of these characters. I think that's what this entire show has been. Like I've noticed. The fact is that this show is not gonna have a lot of action. For these purposes of the characters. These characters are not trying to be back in that action. They're not trying to be back in that violence. Like when a Matt, right? When Matt like literally slapped Punisher, Punisher wanted him to do that. He wanted to wake him up because for the most part, that side of Matt has been far too dead since Foggy's dead. And that's what
Hmm.
he's been trying to suppress. He's been trying to suppress that the entire time. And when he got that little expression of rage and violence in what's it called in episode 2, that had consequences for that because now the cops know that he has those type of skills. They could get him, they could get his entire practice and just send it downhill because he
Mm-hmm.
technically brought himself into that situation. So, and that's same thing for Kingpin. Like we don't see the violence that he has committed with Adam, but he's definitely like, you can tell he's been really trying to suppress that, and that's why the action's also been suppressed with him because they're so focused on trying to move on from the lives they've had before, while also trying to make new lives for themselves. But that little
Mm-hmm.
piece of them that wants to go back into their primal side, the side that made them feel the most alive. Like honestly, like Matt like slapping Punisher, that kind of awoken something in him, that made him feel alive. Same thing for Fisk. Torturing Adam, I mean, the poor guy, I mean, he just, I mean, you know, I mean, he's just a victim of circumstance, you know? I mean, just because he just fell in love with Vanessa, and then, Fisk don't like that, and kind of sucks that that his wife is a crime boss, but that it is what it is. It's just a lot, and I've been really coming around to the terms of this is a reinvention of Daredevil. It's not going to be the Netflix series yet. This is just a series that is trying to ease us back into who these characters are trying to be while reminding us that there's a reason why they're trying to be this way because they're trying to strive to be past of who they were before. And that's what Born Again can really mean to me, you know?
I like that they don't like that they're trying to be their former selves. Like they're trying not to be. What I feel like they're really striving to be is like they're doing it to a point where it's like you're gonna see those same qualities of their Netflix counterparts or their old ways, and they're going to then reinvent it to the point where it's like you're gonna see this mix between that and what Disney and Marvel is going to be creating to not only just capture that same essence of what Netflix gave, but you're also seeing a more tuned in and more faithful adaptation to Kingpin, to Daredevil, to Punisher, and then all these other characters like Matt, to Matt, Karen, Foggy, and Vanessa. And we're seeing something that I think that this actually works in a way where it's like you're taking something from a series that was not originally part of the MCU or at least part of the canon in some degree. But what they're doing is a series where they're going through something and they have to find themselves and rediscover what it's like to be their old selves and how could they be able to take that part of their lives that's been shattered forever and reconstruct themselves. And honestly, this is a good series that deals with loss. I love the fact that they are able to express and convey that theme throughout this whole entire series and this season. And it just does an incredible job on making you feel like it's okay to not be okay. Like it's okay to not be vulnerable to or it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to sometimes not show any emotion from time to time, but it's not okay to keep that suppressed. But the way how you take that rage and you take, the hurt that you have, it also depends on how you go and you turn that into something different. And it's a way how you can take that piece of you that you're begging for something to come back and you're begging for that feeling to come back and you want to fill that void up. And it takes it to a level where you're never going to be the same, but you're also going to be the same person again while reinventing yourself to move forward. And that's what I think is such a beautiful thing about this series because it's not only doing that and Matt doing that with Foggy, but it's every single one of these characters that they lost their streaming home. They lost their rights from Netflix. When these characters and when these shows moved from Netflix to Disney Plus, I was honestly freaking out because I thought when they announced that they were going to take the shows off of Netflix, when I had Netflix, I thought, oh, wait, so why? And then when Disney Plus announced that their new home was going to be on Disney Plus, I thought, oh, so that's what they're doing. But honestly, it's like they did lose a piece of themselves when their home, was moved from Netflix to Disney Plus. But now it feels more natural the more that it's on. And I honestly feel like it's just a great way of, using born again and that term.
Amen to that, honestly. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
just been a lot. It's just been a roller coaster of how we even got here. It's an absolute blessing that we're even here in this moment to even
Hmm.
talk about even Daredevil being in the MCU, Daredevil even being technically a revival now. It's just so many stuff, right? And I feel like the show is trying to what's it go remind us of that, we're not supposed to be in these situations. We're not supposed to be um we're literally life gives us second chances, and
Hmm.
sometimes it's kind of a reason why we should kind of tread past and move forward and forgive, right? We can't be constantly sour toward others anymore because at the end of the day, life is so short that we just probably should forgive, let go of
Hmm.
that trauma that's been like like has literally been put onto you. You know, you gotta let go,
Mhm.
and that's what has been with the show. It's been trying to let go of who they were before, and then move on and move forward to who they want to be. And that's the thing, because like forgiveness is really hard. Just like these characters, it's hard to move on. It's gonna be tough to move on when, especially when there's reminders of reasons why you shouldn't move on. You know, like you can have like a like you know like there's some people who have like ex relationships, right? Like you can have a relationship with a girlfriend and it doesn't work out, but yet you're trying to move on, constantly trying to move on, give forgiveness to that person, right? You do so much, but there's always these
Mhm.
constant little memories of why you don't want to move on. You don't want to lose that kind of moment there. You know,
Mhm.
keep you want to keep just lingering in that moment for a second, a little second more, because you miss that feeling, right? You miss that
Mhm.
feeling of being with them, you know? And that's kind of how it is with these characters. It's kind of like moving on from an ex girlfriend or ex boyfriend, you know? You're trying to move on constantly, constantly, but there's always something that is lingering there that's still gonna hook you back the instant you get the taste of it, you know? So that's why the show it's kind of going it's not the form that I expected for Netflix Daredevil, you know? I wouldn't consider this season 4 of Daredevil, but it's definitely something new and it's trying to hook you in with the same taste and same flavor while also trying to be what's it called? Try being true to these characters. And I feel like so far it's been trying to do the best job it's possibly trying to do, and honestly, it's been
Mhm.
pretty solid, and I liked it so far.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I love it. Absolutely. I absolutely love the feeling. And like throughout this whole entire thing, we also see that, Matt has to struggle or shouldn't even have to struggle, but he does. He struggles with how people's mindsets have changed, especially with when, he's trying to go and he's trying to advocate and he's trying to fight for his clients and that they end up unsatisfied because usually in the Netflix series they're all satisfied with the way that he's able for him and Foggy and Karen when they were all together before they ended up splitting apart and then coming back together. They were satisfied with the way that they would work with each other and they were satisfied with how they would settle. And then, now, like, he's not used to this. He's not used to feeling like not only are people rejecting, Daredevil as a vigilante and a hero, but they're also rejecting Matt Murdock as a lawyer, with them thinking that he's no good and that, he is just kind of washed up at this point. And it's like, he has to deal with having to feel like he can't forgive himself for not being able to save Foggy right on time. And honestly, it was not even Matt's fault. Even with his sense of heightened senses, even the best of heroes, they're not going to be able to make it in time. I mean, like you've seen instances with Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy from Amazing Spider-Man 2. Even Infinity War showed that, even that they were there, they were very close with defeating Thanos, but they didn't do so. And there's going to be moments where, which is what I love about Endgame, is that it was a movie to basically reflect about, I could have, I should have, I would have, but I didn't. How can we do it to move on? And there were those who did not want to move on. And then it's great for this series because now we have Fisk and Vanessa. Their marital issues are very, very important to me, in my opinion, to the both of these characters, just because I feel like this is what's going to draw Fisk into being not only a reinvented version of himself, but the old version of himself. Like it's going to be like this interesting dynamic that we're going to see, to where I feel like this is going to be where his ugly, evil side of crime and being in the mobs is going to show. And, New York is not going to be happy about it. They're going to fear him. They're going to be in this position where it's like the people are going to flee. They're going to want to move. They're going to want to feel like they're not safe anymore. And it's kind of like how, in terms of being a Christian, this is kind of like an antichrist type of situation, because as in the Bible, it shows that when the antichrist shows himself to the world, that there's going to be 3.5 years of him being nice and that he's going to be loved by everybody and that he is going to be considering himself as God. And then the next 3.5 years of the 7 years of tribulation, to where he's going to rule with an iron fist. He's going to be ruling like if he's a tyrant and that he's going to punish people and there's going to be all of this devastation and hurt and pain. And that's what I feel like Kingpin is. Even though that Matt represents kind of like a devil like character with Daredevil, it's an interesting irony that I see with Daredevil as he has so many ideas that he's trying to lean towards just wanting to be a Catholic and a Christian, and you can have both of those together. And I love seeing from this side of it to where, he's not perfect. And even when he goes to confessions over at the church, he's not perfect and he's going to sin. He's going to stumble. He's going to fall as both a lawyer and as a hero, and evidently as a person, because in the end, God did not make us perfect. He put us in this point where when our bodies and minds get transformed, that's when we're going to be at around the level of where God is at. And then we'll understand why we were not made to be perfect, because he's the only one that's perfect. And I love the fact that this dynamic that we see with Fisk and with Matt, that they're slowly going back. It's like a reborn Christian or a reborn Catholic's journey to where they're having their relationship with God and they stumble and they fall. God gives us the opportunity on being able to pick ourselves right back up and keep moving forward with life, or we just stumble and fall and we abandon him completely. Because even though that in the end, when people think God abandoned me, God did this to me, it was never that way, because of how, God never abandons us, but we abandon God. But it's up to us on when we fall into sin. Are we going to get ourselves right back up? And when we go through the mud of sin and life, are we going to let it cling onto us and get dirty? Or are we going to let it wash over us like water and like the blood of Christ and just keep moving on through an unknown valley that we don't even know of?
Absolutely. Amen to that, man. All that stuff you said, that was pretty good.
And honestly, I do want to get really quick into the honorable mentions about them referencing about the scrolls, which that's a new one. I never thought that we'd hear civilians mention anything about scrolls. That's a very interesting thing that we're kind of acknowledging that secret invasion did happen. And it's nice that we're finally seeing that with Daredevil, especially with these versions of the characters. Like we're seeing that. Like, honestly, this is starting to actually see how this is going to tie in into Doomsday and into Secret Wars. I don't know if they're like little Easter eggs just because they're playing it as an Easter egg, or they really are tying this into the main bigger picture now. Because if they are doing this to tie it in into Doomsday and a Secret Wars, this is a clever way of doing it. Just like how with Captain America, Brave New World, they tied in Eternals with the Celestial that's stuck out of the earth, and then them mentioning about adamantium. This is such a great way, especially in a post Endgame era to the multiverse, to where you could be able to bring these references in and make it flow. This reminds me honestly of Falcon and the Winter Soldier when they mentioned Madripoor for the first time, and we thought, oh, that's X-Men territory, like that's mutant territory. So we're really going to dive right into this, and we're going to see these characters. We're going to see something. And they're doing a great job doing so. Despite that, while people don't really appreciate the way how things are going with the MCU, I'm going to be the first to say it. You can't blame just the writing. Like, you cannot just say it's the writing. People have to think about that COVID really reshaped Marvel's plans. They reshaped Disney and Marvel's plans. You can't just say that the writing was awful on it alone. They had to restructure everything in order for them to create something brand new. Then you also had the writers and actor strikes back in 2023. That shifted a lot, especially with Daredevil Born Again and with Captain America Brave New World and with these other shows and movies that we have and the ones that we're having upcoming. And the thing is that also reshaped a lot of things too. And then with the Jonathan Major situation with him being Kang, and then the whole situation with him and his ex-girlfriend, that was another thing that reshaped it. So it's not that the stories are terribly written. They had to rewrite them in a hurry. And especially because you're shifting your thing from one thing to another. You can't just solely say, It's because they don't care. It's because things kept changing. They were trying to quickly adapt, but I don't think Disney gave them enough time to quickly readjust. Because if they did, I feel like things would have been a whole lot more different. Because with Bob Chapek as the CEO of Disney at that one point, I think that it made a whole bunch of a difference compared to Bob Iger. And, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know who the new CEO is going to be after Bob Iger. We don't know what the plans are going to be for Marvel Studios and Disney. But I honestly feel like you have to realize you're under different leadership, you're under different people who have different ideas. So you cannot just put the blame on superhero fatigue or bad writing or the CGI being weird or anything. It has nothing to do with that. Even with these moments, it's not that the MCU has lost its touch. We're just not used to not seeing new heroes. But I think the more that we watch these shows and the more that we're trying to move into a new, bigger story, the more that I think that we're going to start really appreciating more about what Marvel's trying to do and that they want to be able to give more of the universe to many people for them to enjoy. And I think that that's a beauty about what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is as a whole, not just, post Endgame, but just everything in its entirety from the Infinity Saga to the Multiverse Saga and even to what we might have as the Mutant Saga. Sure, some shows were better than others, some movies were better than others. But honestly, it's become diverse enough to the point where we can pick and choose what we like. And honestly, we shouldn't use that to our advantage to go and say that Marvel has not been doing great. I think that Marvel so far has been doing incredibly well despite the changes, and they're trying to adjust and readjust as best as they can to not only give these great stories like Daredevil Born Again and like Endgame and Infinity War and all these other amazing shows and movies, but they're doing this in a way where they love the fans, they love these characters, and they want to be able to be relatable to people and speak to people.
Amen to that. Yeah, no, it's definitely it's gonna be a long road ahead of us for the MCU, and me personally, I do think that there is a thing called like mediocre film fatigue, where people just are tired of mediocre films. That's definitely a thing.
Mhm.
Mediocre film and projects and all that, and it's up to the person to determine whether or not it's mediocre, and it's not up to me. Some things I can view as mediocre, someone else can view as one of the favorite things ever. So it's really up to them, and that's why it's just with the way how Marvel's been these days, it's definitely hitting their adjustment period where they're still trying to figure out what is the next big thing that they want. And it seems like they want to go Secret Wars and Doctor Doom, right? But then what's after that, So it's definitely that vibe that I'm getting where they're still trying to adjust. But there have been projects that have been shined and that are like a good point, a peak point for the MCU. And obviously, when people always mention like if the MCU's back or if Marvel's back or not, that's just a thing to just get clicks, right? In total honestly, Marvel is just a company that is going through the same ups and downs as everyone else's, we were just so used to the highs of Endgame and Infinity War that we forget there's always gonna be lows, You can't go high without having a little crash at the end, right? So
Mhm.
that's why it's definitely gonna be very interesting next couple of years, especially with these new projects. And I'm
Mhm.
intrigued to see where it goes,
I mean, I am too. I mean, honestly, I really love the fact that there's so much in the MCU that people they could be able to agree on or disagree on. And honestly, like for example, I'll say it, I love She-Hulk. I thought it was a great series. I mean, sure, I mean the ending could have been a little bit different the more that I thought about it, but honestly, I think it was a great show. For, we got a comic accurate She-Hulk. I thought that it felt close to the comics from what I've heard because I'm not a comic person. I thought it was great. I loved the Marvels too because I felt like I was watching an old 2003, 2005 superhero movie that, yeah, even though it was an hour and 45 minutes long, I honestly loved the fact that it was short and it was simple and it felt like a simple movie from like 2005, 2007, like if it was made by Fox. And I was okay with it. I thought that they did pretty good. I wish Secret Wars was a little bit better. I felt like the plot felt a little bit more rushed the more the episodes kept progressing along, but that's okay. I mean, look, every series is not going to have the same high and the same low and the same success rate. And even the movies too. Like for me, I wasn't a fan of Thor Love and Thunder. I felt like it just wasn't for me. But I did enjoy seeing the Guardians of the Galaxy. I did enjoy seeing Gore the God Butcher, just despite, how his character was treated. And I love seeing Christian Bale as this villain that I wish that they would bring back in some way. But there were some Marvel movies that a lot of people didn't like, but I actually loved. I mean, like I loved Captain America: Brave New World, and I'll even put it like this: to me, as a person who I have a biased opinion, I loved it more than Deadpool and Wolverine because I'll be realistic. Harrison Ford is my favorite actor, and I loved it a lot more because of that. Not going to say that Hugh Jackman is bad because he's incredible, but Harrison Ford was an actor that I watched his movies ever since I was a kid, and that drew me in a whole lot more. And with my experience of how my grandma loved Captain America, she loved that Sam took up the shield to become Captain America, and and the fact that she wanted to see it and she didn't get that chance, that's what made me go in and be like, you know what, I'm gonna go in for her. And I was so not disappointed. It's my favorite. Honestly, to me, Captain America: Brave New World is my all-time favorite MCU movie in Phase 5. Then it's gonna be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, then Deadpool and Wolverine, and then the Marvels, and then Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's totally nothing wrong with having a difference of opinions. And I honestly feel like the superhero fatigue, it's not even a superhero fatigue. It's just more like I can understand why people don't like certain things. But the thing is like you said, it's more of like we're not used to not seeing Iron Man. We're not used to seeing Captain America. We're not used to seeing Chris Evans. We're not used to seeing Robert Downey Jr. not there. We're not used to them not being there. We're not used to Scarlett Johansson not being there. And we're not used to, Hulk and Hawkeye and Thor being the only ones that are there out of the original 6. And we want for everybody to keep on continuing. But like you mentioned about this, like we got to move forward. Like this is a show about moving forward. And in the MCU, we got to keep moving forward. And that's the most important step out of all of Marvel, and not just Daredevil Born Again. This episode had way more than the previous episode. Like there was so much more to unpack here with just John Bernthal alone.
Oh man, yeah, dude. That's why I'm like, I still think it's my favorite episode. I think it's my favorite episode just because of that second half. That first half is still solid, but the second half, that's where everything gets going. That's where everything gets going. And I'm like, yes.
Right. The story is going to get so much better after this one. Like it's already good, but then once Frank came in and once the second half came in, it's going to elevate itself even more. If we get more of a comic accurate suit for Frank as Punisher, this is going to be a good series. Like it's going to be even better than it was before. And that's what I appreciate about Marvel Studios and Disney, and that they're trying to be comic accurate, but they're also doing it in a respectful manner to Netflix and their reputation of how they created these characters. Like honestly, in my opinion, this is one of my favorite Marvel shows of all time now, just because of that, and just because that we have this brand new experiment that we have with this one. Because if Daredevil can succeed in this way, that means the other Defenders got their shot. That also means we can get Cloak and Dagger. We can get the Runaways. We can even probably get like another Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. series, which would be incredible, which I haven't seen Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. yet. And I haven't seen Cloak and Dagger or the Runaways yet. I'm going to watch them with my mom, and it's going to take a long time, but I don't mind going through the journey, and, maybe we'll get another chance at Inhumans. I mean, who knows? This is the test project. Like how X-Men 97 was the test project for reviving an old animated series that so many people loved. This is the test subject for bringing a Netflix series or a MCU series outside of Disney and tying it into the main timeline of the MCU and doing it to where they're not only bringing the characters back, but they're also doing it to where they're making it their own on this version. Hopefully that they are satisfied with the final product once they've seen this whole series come into fruition.
Amen. Yeah, no, I hope everyone's satisfied. I hope I'm satisfied with Born Again, and I hope it's really up there. You know, right now I'm still feeling different to it, but I hope it's still it's gonna be up there with, at least I'm par, you know, really close to season 2 of Daredevil. But you know, I can't, you know, it's really, I think going into the show, I feel like you have to temper your expectations, you know, especially when
Mhm.
you're expecting a revival from Netflix's Daredevil. It's gonna be way different because it's not Netflix's Daredevil. It's something completely different.
I totally agree. I don't think we're going to be disappointed. I think the end product is going to be an incredible thing that nobody saw coming, and that this is going to be a huge, huge thing for so many people. Like, honestly, this is going to bring in both old fans and new fans equally, just like how X Men '97 brought old fans and fans easily. I think that this is what's going to do it. Like, this is going to jumpstart another franchise again.
Hey man, yeah, it's gonna. I feel like there's potential here. There's gonna be so much to do.
Absolutely.